Welcome to Reels on the Rocks, the show where your hosts Whiskey and Sweet Tea discuss film from the unpretentious perspective. Today we bring the month of the flying Farrelly Brothers to a close with a discussion of their film Kingpin. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and as always, please be advised that spoilers are ahead. Hey listeners, welcome back.
What up?
For our second installment of the Flying Farrelly Film Month, the Triple Fs as we dubbed it the last episode. We hope you all have been doing well.
Yeah, hopefully. We record these in advance, so, by the end of this month, I'm hoping that the news of the world has been improving somewhat.
Yes.
It's still about the same as the last time we recorded, so, hope our prayers and hearts and whatever with Ukraine. Hopefully things have not escalated further. But yeah, salutations to anyone from Ukraine or, who is originally from Ukraine that are listening to the show. But yeah, a great time for us to be talking about comedies this month.
Yes, to really lighten the mood in the world. And let's just say, if things are better in a month, we'll say that Whiskey is a psychic, and if things aren't, we'll say he's a quack. So,
If I am a psychic, it's ironic, because I don't believe in psychics, but, who knows? That would be ironic, right? What if God blessed me with a gift I don't think that exists?
Wouldn't that be ironic if, we just all had gifts that we didn't believe in, and that's what made them gifts? So we never
honestly kind of sounds like a comic book hero. It almost kind of reminds me of Constantine with DC Comics, because he's a very cynical exorcist. But anywho,
I mean,
what are we talking about?
Basically, The Exorcist. I mean, The Exorcist is about a priest who doesn't believe anymore, essentially.
I know you don't read as many comics as me, T, but I feel like you'd really like Constantine. Besides the fact that he's a chain smoker, he's basically DC's version of The Exorcist, but as a superhero.
Chain smoker, that's hot. So this episode, we are talking about the 1996 classic comedy Kingpin. Now, this was like last episode's, directed by Peter and Bobby Farley, although both Farrelly, but this is a name. Both their names were on it, but they did not write it. This was written by Mort Nathan and Barry, and I cannot read my handwriting, Barry Fanaro.
That's interesting, because last episode I said this, but they were saying that usually they do write their own movies, but they have a writing partner, so usually when they write their movies, it's the two of them plus, I've got my notes from last episode, let me see, it's, Benny Yellen is usually the guy they write their movies for. So that's interesting that and also that makes sense that, we'll get into my opinions of this film, but it makes a lot of sense that they didn't write this one. And it's interesting, so this was kind of perfect timing, because I wasn't aware of this when you picked this film, and I'm sure you weren't, that these two films are the first two films that the Farrelly Brothers, I always want to say Farrelly, but it's apparently Farrelly, Farrelly, whatever. It's the first two films that they ever did. So this, just like we're following last episode, this was the follow-up to Dumb and Dumber. And strangely, this is a lot of, I know a lot of people where this is their favorite Farrelly Brother film. And that always was interesting to me, because I'd never really seen this one before. I caught it on TV a few times, and I thought it was really strange. I had a friend in grade school who referenced this movie a bunch, and he explained to me where the reference came from and stuff. But I don't know. It's interesting, because this one is a lot of people's favorite Farrelly Brothers film.
Well, and it's interesting that you brought up this second one. They actually did kind of use the Dumb and Dumber in the marketing. They even on the poster even says, "From the idiots, what brung you Dumb and Dumber." It says it on the poster.
Oh my god. That's actually kind of... Again, we'll get into my opinion of this film, but it's very telling that they used the last film to market this film without really speaking on this film's strengths. But before we forget, we should talk about what we're drinking.
Yes.
So, for this episode, I am sticking with the theme of beer. And I gotta say, I only picked this because it sounded cool, but this episode I'll be drinking Dragon's Milk, which is a bourbon barrel aged. It's a bourbon barrel aged stout. Now, I will be transparent in saying I picked it because I freaking love dragons. I'm a sucker for them. But as I was reading the bottle, I realized that this is actually brewed in Holland, which, I mean, I guess that does actually have a bit of a connection with this film in that it does feature Amish, and Amish, I believe, they're Dutch. So the fact that this is from Holland, actually, there's a very, very tenuous connection.
Well,
but,
I think Amish, they actually, I think they come from Switzerland, maybe. I could be wrong.
No, not Switzerland. I know it's like I think they're Dutch, but I might be wrong. But I've been to Amish country, and they explain this stuff to you, and it's been ages, so I don't.
Well, because I know I do know there's a difference between Amish and then Dutch. I've heard people refer to Amish than Dutch Amish, so I think there are different sects out there.
It's a religion, so it's where they came from.
It's all a way Amish of life.
All Amish people are American. Like if they're here, they're citizens of the United States, but the religion apparently originates from whatever country.
It's Anabaptist.
Expect a spicy episode, everybody, because this one is 11% alcohol by volume. So
okay. So you're going to be lots of fun. You know Amish historically speak German, right?
No, that's what I mean. I was actually going to say, I feel like they might come from Germany. I know that it's not Switzerland. I know that for sure. But, yeah. I don't know. It's interesting. I'd like to go back. Amish country is a lot of fun to visit if you're either from outside of the United States or you've just never been. It's a great time. They make good stuff. I can even see it from here where I'm recording. First time I went for a DC trip in middle school, I got what they call a quillo, which is a pillow that unfolds into a quilt.
That's pretty cool.
It's really cool. On that, and on that same trip, we stopped off at an Amish farmer's market for lunch. And I think I blew all my money on junk food, like chocolates and stuff like that. But they make good stuff.
I mean, I used to go to Amish country up in Indiana.
Yeah.
I remember there was a place that we used to go to all the time called Das Essenhaus. And they had really good food there. But I remember going into some of the stores and being like, Mom, this cheese has eyes in it.
It's a fascinating way of life. One I certainly could never stand living in, but but they do make great stuff. Say what you will about them shunning technology, but man, they make some excellent food, some excellent quilts,
and some excellent furniture.
Seriously, I would imagine so. If I was if I was living in that part of the country, that's probably I bet it's cheaper probably too.
Yes and no,
because since they don't need Wi-Fi and whatnot, they probably don't huck up the charges for things. So probably mostly just cost of materials and labor. But anyway, so we're talking about Kingpin.
Okay. Now, Kingpin starring Woody Harrelson as Roy Munson, Vanessa Angel as Claudia, Randy Quaid as Ishmael Borg, I think is what his last name was, and then Bill Murray as Ernie McCracken. Or Big Ernie, as he's known later. First off, Randy Quaid. Oh my God, I think he was just in the news recently because I think he's trying to get asylum in Canada because he says the Hollywood mafia is after him.
He said that years ago, so I guess he's still trying to do that. It's funny. I watched this one with my sister, and she did not know Randy Quaid went off the deep end. So halfway through the movie, I was like, it's so weird that Randy Quaid is in this, because he was really big in the 90s. And it's so funny watching him play sort of a wholesome character, knowing how he is in real life.
Yeah.
And my sister was like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, oh, you don't know? And I didn't bring up the YouTube manifesto he posted, years ago with some lady in a bikini in the background, while he's bearded and wild-eyed and talking about government surveillance or whatever he was. It's really funny because the other movie he was in that was a really big hit was Independence Day, and that movie's kind of funny because he's sort of playing it's funny because he's sort of playing a conspiracy nut job in that film, and then I guess art imitates real life. But yeah, so
See, I know him as
I
Eddie from Christmas Vacation.
that too, and Regular Vacation as well. I think he
He was in that
Eddie
too.
in the.
Oh, I know he was
I
also.
think so.
He was in Vegas Vacation also.
Again, I think he was Eddie in all of the Vacation films. So that's like he was a big star, like especially in the '90s, partly because of Independence Day, but even before then. But I guess like so. First question will be like, why did you recommend this? But also, I'm sure you want to get into the nitty gritty of like the budget and how much this made and stuff. Because I'm actually kind of curious. I didn't do any research since this was your pick, so I am kind of curious if this was as big of a hit as Dumb and Dumber.
So okay, so I picked this movie because I was trying to find a movie that was equal to Dumb and Dumber in kind of its ridiculousness, because it's not too ridiculous, but it's kind of ridiculous. So I was trying to find something that came up, and then this one came to mind. I was like, oh my God, I haven't watched this in forever. And I remember being fun. And then it turns out, after we shared our picks, that they were both made by the Flying Farrelly Brothers. So that was a happy accident that happened.
And again, it's also kind of a happy accident. I mentioned this in the last episode, but I believe that the Farrelly brothers are Irish American. So for the month of March, where normally like the big holiday is St. Patrick's Day, I don't know, kind of fits.
It does. It
ended
does
up being
fit.
sort of accidental, but yeah.
This whole month was a happy accident. But I'm very, very happy with how it came out. But the box office for this one, this was not a big performer. So it had a budget of 25 million and it pulled 32.2 million at the box office.
Period. You mean like worldwide?
Worldwide, yeah.
Damn, that's actually fascinating because, like I said, I'm not joking when I say I've met a number of people where this is the favorite film by the Farrelly brothers.
Well, it's
not a majority of people, but there are people, and that's kind of the thing you always forget when you're watching movies is every movie is someone's favorite movie.
Yeah.
If you're watching like some garbage, or at least in your opinion it's garbage, it's like this is their favorite movie. Well, and I have met people where this is their favorite film by the Farrelly brothers, and I find that so fascinating because they've done quite a bit of things. Like I feel like most people would say either Dumb and Dumber or There's Something About Mary is their favorite film. So it's interesting to me.
So,
but
there's actually a story behind that. Oh, kind of a theory behind that. So Peter Farrelly has gone on record as saying that the low box office was the biggest disappointment of their career. It was not good, but he does bring historical context into this, and I can kind of see how this would make a role. He does cite his belief as not doing well as it opening just the day before the 1996 bombing of the Olympics in Atlanta. So as we remember, I don't know if you remember this from 9/11, there was kind of this big thing after a national tragedy like that, where it's like, how long is respectable enough to not to feel happy? Do you know what I mean?
No, and it's not just like, and also it sounds like the Farrelly brothers were a little bit more respectful, but every time an artist released something right in time for a tragedy, there's always kind of blaming the tragedy. I did not know this when it happened, but years later I found out Mariah Carey starred in her first film around the 9/11 attacks.
Yeah, well, I mean...
And she said that's the reason it didn't do well was because of 9/11.
But
whatever, that's probably somewhat true.
I mean, that there was a huge economic collapse in the entertainment and vacation industries after 9/11.
Yes.
The nation was mourning, and there was a huge downturn. Like Disney, notably at the time, they didn't have enough people to keep their resorts open, so they only had I think at Disney World one or two of their 17 resorts open because they didn't have enough people visit. So I do think there is you can't blame literally every tragedy for that, but
no. I speak again, and also it sounds like the Farrelly brothers were not they were respectful about it. Mariah Carey's just funny because if you look at the numbers of the box office for the movie she was in, it's think you might just be conveniently blaming something else.
Well, but they also said
anyway,
that after it went into VHS distribution, it was a huge hit.
Yeah, and that's also
off.
kind of and we haven't actually maybe God, it's funny, we've been doing this show for almost, this is our third year doing this,
right.
So I feel like we must have talked about a film like that. There's a couple that come to mind, like one off the top of my head is Fight Club, where it did not do well in theaters, but then through Blockbuster everyone rented Fight Club and enjoyed it. So
that's
I
think
a whole
Shawshank Redemption was kind of the same way. Like it became huge.
No. It was exactly the same way. It was not a big, but it was the critics liked it when it came out, but no one went to see it. And then later on, people.
Well, because it was cheap to pick up for syndicate. A lot of people remember watching because TNT used to show it like nonstop.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, that was their first experience watching it, was on TNT.
Gotcha.
So there's actually an argument, at least with that movie, that people are saying, people have to, like, film scholars and stuff have actually passed the question if nostalgia is the reason why Shawshank Redemption is as popular as it is today. But that's for another story.
For sure. And that's something we might want to review in the future. I think it's really good. I had no nostalgia connection when I saw it, and it's kind of one of those where it's not my favorite film of all time, but the people who say that it's there is no such thing as the greatest film of all time. And that's where I like to have discussions with people, because even if I don't feel that way, there can be like a case for it. And that's one of those films where, even though it's not my favorite film of all time, I do think that there is an argument to be made about it being, quote unquote, the greatest film of all time. Same as like Citizen Kane or Vertigo or like any of the other ones that are always thrown around.
You can't even name my favorite. Come on.
Well, and yours. I mean, hey, Gone with the Wind. There's definitely a case for that one as well. It's for me, that's where I have fun talking about movies with people, is because everyone's got their own taste and stuff. And I would say Gone with the Wind is also a great contender for greatest film of all time. Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
It depends on what you're into, but like I like talking to people about movies when they have kind of, their own opinion of things. Well, so anyway,
yeah.
So this one did really well with rentals.
And actually, even though critics were kind of mixed on it, Siskel and Ebert did give it a positive review, giving it a 3.5 out of 4.
Of course they did.
And later on, Bravo gave it listed as number 68 on Bravo's 100 Funniest Movies, and Vulture listed as number 2 on a list of Woody Harrelson's best films, which I actually kind of agree with that on.
He's really good in comedies. You don't see him too frequently, but when he is in a comedy, he's really good.
You know what's funny?
I feel like depending on the age of whoever's listening, like I'm sure most of you probably know him from Zombieland, and that's also a comedy, and I thought he was pretty funny in that. Also, speaking of Zombieland, I mentioned this when I was watching this with my sister, but it's funny because in Zombieland, he plays like a big Bill Murray fanboy.
And then Bill Murray shows up in a later one,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. He co-stars with Bill Murray in this one. So I didn't think about that when I saw Zombieland, being like, oh, they'd already co-starred together. So I was thinking like, oh, like when I even saw Zombieland, I wasn't thinking of that, probably because I really hadn't seen this film. And it was like, oh, this might even be the first time Woody Harrelson's working with Bill Murray. Oh, that's really sweet. He might be a big fan, and blah, blah, blah. And now watching this, I'm like, oh, no, this isn't even the first time they've acted together.
Right. So the people who ended up getting the starring roles in this case would be Woody Harrelson and Bill Murray. They were not the first choices. Michael Keaton was considered for Roy Munson. And Nicolas Cage was also considered, but he turned it down. And then for
Nick Cage would have been great, actually. He's good at playing very weird characters.
You know what's weird about Nicolas Cage? Everybody talks about Nicolas Cage, and I know I've seen him in a lot of stuff, but he's never like stood out to me to be like, oh yeah, he was in that or something like that. And then it's when people go back, he was in this, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, he was.
Well, it's funny because next month we'll be looking at a Nicolas Cage film.
That is
spoiler
true.
for So anyway, but in my opinion, Nick Cage is really good when he's playing like crazy or eccentric characters.
Mm-hmm.
Very recently, he just did that film Pig, which I highly recommend you see, T, if you haven't yet. That's like a really good example of him putting on a good performance.
Right.
But he's very good at playing like crazy people. Like, I mean, he won an Oscar for playing an alcoholic and leaving Las Vegas. So he's very good at that. Like, even I'd go as far to say is like not his, the remake of The Wicker Man that he starred in is kind of good just because his performance is so ridiculously over the top. It's not as good as the original film, but just for sort of the unintentional comedic performance of Nicolas Cage. But he's hit or miss. And sometimes I even feel like he's a little too much. Like, as a horror fan, I saw Color Out of Space a little while ago, maybe a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, and I feel like he became kind of aware that he was sort of getting memed on the internet, and so he went full Nicolas Cage in that film, and I felt like it actually kind of hurt his performance because he didn't, he could have toned it back.
Right.
But he would have been an interest. I kind of would like to see that. But Woody Harrelson's a really good comedic actor, and he doesn't get that a lot. Even though he was famous for being the bartender in Cheers.
Yeah. See, like,
I feel like he plays tough guys a lot.
So, like, people now, when they think of Woody Harrelson, they always think of Woody Harrelson in these dramatic roles. To me, Woody Harrelson will always be Woody on Cheers. Like,
exactly.
He's always, to me, he's Woody playing a character.
Exactly. No, and I guess we'll get into, because one thing I kind of like thought about as I was watching both of these films, and it's so like the Farrelly Brothers, they hit it big with Dumb and Dumber, but throughout their entire careers directing comedies, they always got all-star casts.
Yeah.
There's something about Mary. They got Ben Stiller and Cameron Diaz. They Shallow Hal was not exactly a big hit, but they got Jack Black and Gwyneth Paltrow. Like every dumb comedy they ever did, they got an all-star cast of sometimes award-winning actors, and it was just kind of interesting again, like seeing Woody Harrelson and Randy Quaid of all people in this comedy. And I guess like Randy Quaid was in comedies more than anything, so that's not that crazy. But it's just they always got like A-list talent. Well, and it's kind of funny like thinking Jim Carrey's an exception because he wasn't really famous at the time Dumb and Dumber came out, or even early in their career, the fact that they got all of these really big stars is kind of impressive.
Well, there's some interesting stories about casting for this movie. Lynn Shay, who played the landlady in this movie, she apparently showed up for this audition in character, and they took her sister. They literally thought she was a homeless woman who had come in looking for an ashtray, and they tried to throw her out. Before they realized what was happening. And I'm like, really?
They cast her well. That is one of the grossest scenes in the Ooh.
And then they had asked Michael Richards from Seinfeld, who played Kramer on Seinfeld. They wanted him, I don't know what role they wanted him for, but I guess they brought him in to talk about doing a role in this movie. And I guess from what I've read, the meeting didn't go well, and there was some sort of like disagreement or altercation or something.
He just started screaming the N-word at the top of his lungs for some reason. Just over and over again. There was no one there that even like he just kept saying it, and they were very confused. They had to throw him out after saying the N-word so many times.
Probably. No, but
this dragon's milk is hitting me, guys. Sorry.
Apparently so. Well, there was a disagreement, and so he was in this bathroom for like 30 minutes, so they go to get him, and the dude had climbed out the window and like left.
That's weird. If it had gone well, I feel like he would have been good as Bill Murray's character. I feel like he would have been really good as like a bad guy.
Yeah, this is
and not just because of his controversies. Like he actually, like, before he ruined his career, I mean, and even before Seinfeld, he was very good at comedic roles. So he would have been a good fit for this film. I don't know why he didn't get along with the Farrelly brothers.
I kind of want to know what that conversation was and why no one why he couldn't get, why they're having disagreements.
I'll save this for another time, but one of my favorite stories is David Lynch talking to George Lucas about directing Episode 6 of Star Wars. It's David Lynch tells it better than I ever could, but it's just really funny because around the time he was directing Dune, George Lucas wanted him to direct the final installment of Star Wars at the time, and it was just a very, very bizarre for him kind of experience.
Yeah, that would be very bizarre. They also said that they had approached Chris Farley about being in this movie. They wanted him to be Ishmael.
Oh my god, actually, ooh. I don't know. I kind of like how Randy Quaid played the character because he was so wholesome. Like, I like Chris Farley, but kind of his go-to at the time was sort of just screaming and acting really, like, angry. Well, and I feel like I actually liked Ishmael as a character, and I felt like a lot of the gags with him worked really well because he was so, like, innocent and wholesome. For anyone who's listening, he's the Amish character in the film who's like a very talented bowler. But part of what was funny to me was that he was an Amish person. He was very naive and he was very like kind-hearted. And just seeing him like get into these depraved situations was really funny. It'd be like watching a nun smoking crack. You know what I mean? It would just be funny because of how it doesn't fit the character,
and but it's like he has no idea what the implications are of what's going on.
Exactly. And despite Randy Quaid being kind of a nutcase in real life, apparently, he plays him very perfectly. Like, again, like part of what was sort of funny, almost in a meta way for me, was knowing how Randy Quaid is nowadays and seeing him play this very likable character.
Yeah.
And he plays him straight. He plays him like a very good-natured, good Christian, wholesome, like nice guy
who sometimes dances for other men for money.
Right? So yeah, I don't know. I like Chris Farley. I like him just fine. I feel like he wouldn't have been the same. I feel like it wouldn't have been a good vibe or a good
I don't
fit.
think so either. I actually don't.
It would have just been him like. He'd be like doing some Amish like he'd be shoeing a horse and then he'd hit his thumb and go, "Oh darn it, god damn it!" You know, like that. That's Chris Farley's sense of humor, and it's fine. But
I don't think he would have worked in the movie. I don't. He had the right look, I think, but I don't think he was. I as we've talked about last time, it wouldn't have played to his comedic sensibilities.
Exactly, and I know what you mean about look. He kind of has an Amish haircut just by himself.
Yeah.
Or had. Back. Rest in peace, sir. But
yeah. So this is a movie that I enjoyed because I think, like, talk about Dumb and Dumber, but this one even more so. It was a comedy, but it had lots of heart, and it didn't cross into shock territory again.
Ooh, I disagree.
Oh, you disagree?
So I guess so. It probably sounded like to anyone who listened.
What was your opinion? First impressions, I guess.
Okay, so as I said, I was somewhat familiar with this film because I'd seen clips of it on Comedy Central, obviously edited for television during daytime hours because it's rated R, so none of the,
was it rated? I thought it was rated PG-13.
Oh, no.
Did you
Not
watch some? Yes, it was a PG-13 one. Then there's an unrated R version. Or there's an R-rated.
No, I did. Well, then I didn't. I didn't watch the unrated version. I just was under the impression it was rated R because I'm actually surprised it was, considering a lot of the jokes were pretty. This was a lot of gross out humor. So let me get into so last episode it probably sounded like I was foreshadowing that I hated this movie or something. That's not the case. This movie made me think very deeply about the Farrelly Brothers, and that's also kind of another reason why I wanted to talk about Dumb and Dumber first, because I was watching it with my sister, and both of us kind of came to the same conclusion, where we were like, this is funny. This is really funny. But I just don't care. And it's almost kind of ironic with what I talked about last week with the Farrelly Brothers really wanting you to care about the final act and about the characters and stuff like that. For this, I thought the jokes were hilarious. There were multiple times I had to pause the movie because my sister and I were just
laughing too
not
hard,
able to breathe, laughing so hard. But as far as the like plot and the characters and stuff, like I didn't really care about the story.
How could you not?
And it's interesting
that
you say that this wasn't written by the Farrelly brothers, because I feel like that is probably part of it. In fact, that actually kind of makes sense about what they said about them wanting you to care about the characters and stuff, because they didn't write this. If they had written it, maybe I would have more. So anyway, I got to thinking really deeply about the Farrelly brothers' entire career, because I was just like, it just felt very bizarre. And I was like, why do I like Dumb and Dumber more than this movie? Or like other movies that I like better than this? Mm-hmm. And it kind of dawned on me that none of their movies have very good stories. So in contrast to what they said in that interview I talked about last episode, mm-hmm. I kind of disagree about them. I do think their films have heart. But as far as me being really invested in the story, I wasn't really invested in Dumb and Dumber as far as the story goes. Like, I obviously, like, especially the first time I watched it, I did care. Like, I didn't want them to get murdered, But I wasn't... Part of it is, like, when you go into a comedy, you know that the main characters are not going to get killed, by the end of the movie. Like, yeah. So, like, there is kind of that safety harness of that happening. But it really made me realize, and this goes back to what I said last episode about Dumb and Dumber, is that a lot of their films are just sort of frameworks for gags.
I can see
this
that.
film is like possibly even in a better example, because it's just like there's so many jokes in this one that I thought were really funny. I'll just say right straight up, my favorite joke and my sister's favorite joke in this whole movie, it's also not super gross out or anything like that, but it is so simple and it's perfect for timing and Woody Harrelson's performance and everything. At a point late in the movie, they believe that all of their money has been taken, and they're, it's that point in the movie where they're at their lowest point. And Woody Harrelson and Randy Quaid are like sitting at a bar.
Oh my god! Okay,
and
I know
it just holds on them for like 30 seconds. And eventually Woody Harrelson, Munson, like turns violently to the person next to him and just screams, "Who are you calling a psychopath?" And then the guy just like nervously kind of looks around, puts some money down and leaves. And that was the funniest. That was one of the moments I had to pause because me and my sister were laughing so hard. And it's just the simplest thing. But like that's a perfect example. Another one, this one is kind of gross out, but it was just funny. And this one's also great because I could tell there was like a setup for a punchline that was coming. But the punchline was so ridiculous that it caught me off guard. There's a point where Munson and Borg, you said his name was, Randy Quaid, are like talking in a bathroom. Yeah. And it's a reverse shot where it's like Woody Harrelson's character is washing his hands, and it would appear that the Amish character, Randy Quaid, is on the toilet. Mm-hmm. And it's just like a medium close-up. It looks like he's sitting down. You don't think much about it. But because it didn't start off with an establishing shot, your brain kind of goes, why are they doing that? Yeah. And, and the big punchline and reveal is that Randy Quaid's Amish character, because he's not used to, like, public bathrooms, he's sitting on a urinal and defecating into the urinal. And there's so many reasons I thought it was funny. I thought it was funny because there were men urinating into the urinals around him, and they didn't seem to care to tell him he was doing it wrong. And it was also, again, it's like when I was watching it, I could tell that something was going to be revealed. Like I could tell from the way there was no establishing shot, the way it's really close on them. I'm like, something's funny about this. Yeah. But just the extremeness of what he was doing, and that it's like his pants are around his ankles. It's just no one cares that he's doing it wrong. It was just really funny. But that being said, I do think this, like, one thing I said last episode about Dumb and Dumber is that it really towed the line of PG-13, and I'm not surprised I thought this was R, because this really leans into the gross-out humor a lot more. That's not a bad thing. That does not make this a worse movie.
I'm trying to think, though. Like, I'm trying to think of gross out scenes in this. And the only
Well,
one I
so
can really
perfect
think of is when he's vomiting.
That's the scene I was going to go to, but also there's a couple. I'll list a few things that I think, and again, like, just because I feel like this crosses a line does not mean I think it's bad. It just makes me think that this is less accessible to people.
Hashtag sharpen your pitchforks, listeners. I'm just kidding.
Right? Yeah. No, this is my hot take. And possibly not even a hot take. Some people really like this movie, but
I love this movie.
I'd argue. Yeah, and spoiler alert, I like it. I don't love it, but I do like it. Mostly the jokes I thought were funny. But so, like, the vomiting scene, so, like, he's having sex with his landlady. They make a very good point to show her legs are hairy, and she's wearing granny panties, and you can see, like, bush coming out of the sides of her panties, and it's, like, it's intended to be really nasty. There's also
I think you may have watched the R-rated release of this, because I don't remember seeing that.
Really? Huh? Yeah, maybe I should have watched the.
Yeah, because there was the theatrical.
If I did, yeah. If I did, I guess this will be my soapbox to complain about Amazon, because it's not just this. If you ever, and I'm sure anyone listening has done this, but when you go to Amazon and search a movie, there'll be like 5 different versions of the movie, and it's really unclear which one, like, what the differences are. So if I watched the R-rated version, then that might explain some of it, but I'm fairly certain I watched the theatrical release of this. And not only that, but, like, one of the friends I had in grade school who really liked this movie, like, when I had not seen this movie before, he described the scene exactly the way I saw it, so I don't know, man. Maybe he had the R-rated release or something. But anyway, so that scene was really gross. The one thing that my sister found really shocking, and I knew because I'd seen it on TV, but it is a lot darker than their other films, is kind of the opening thing with this movie is, like, we have Woody Harrelson plays a very, like, up-and-coming, young, naive bowler.
Yeah.
Very, very talented bowler. And he gets into some trouble because of the antagonist of this film, and he loses his hand. Now, when I knew that this was happening, or was going to happen, because I'd seen this before. My sister had never heard of this movie, so when she was watching it, she was like, whoa, that's really dark. And she's not wrong.
Yeah,
like, if you're going into, like, a comedy about bowling, like, that is pretty intense, and there's no gore, there's no super, like, violence or anything like that, but I do think that is kind of an extreme way to start your movie. Another gross out kind of comedy thing right after the intro, when it shows what has happened to our bowler over the years. He's living in a depressing apartment and stuff, but kind of going back to Dumb and Dumber, one of his neighbors talks about drinking his own piss. It's a little bit more graphic than in Dumb and Dumber. He's, like, talking about it, and it's like, oh, why would it make you sick? And stuff like that. There's also a lot more kind of male gazy sort of stuff with the female lead in the film. Like, there's the whole thing where they're grifting people by having her distract people by, like, flashing her body, which, again, I don't think it makes the movie worse, but I would say that as far as, like, stuff that might be viewed as, like, problematic by today's standards, I feel like it's more dude bro-y kind of comedy than Dumb and Dumber ever got. The worst thing that happened in Dumb and Dumber was, like, when Mary in Lloyd's fantasy wasn't wearing panties, but again, that was also Lloyd's fantasy, so of course he's going to be kind of a creep about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I could keep going, I think. Oh, there was some great scenes with the Amish people. The bit where Woody Harrelson chops off the horse hooves.
Yeah.
Again, really, really dark comedy, but, like, pretty funny.
Actually, I have something to say about that scene. So that scene is actually changed from how that was originally in one of the original cuts of the movie, because in the trailer they show him basically cutting off the lower part of the horse's leg, not just the hooves. So, which is why later on we see the horse being so short.
That makes sense, because I was wondering about, like, I still got the joke, but I was like, I don't think the horse would be that much shorter.
Yeah.
But whatever, I guess they were going for extremes. But yeah, like, so it's not even really a criticism so much as an observation, but this is probably, on par, because There's Something About Mary is rated R, and maybe we'll review that in the future at some point, but that one is very gross out. Like, even without seeing the movie, like on the poster and everything, you've got Cameron Diaz with her hair up in like a funny position, and if you've seen the movie, you know why. And it's pretty gross. But this kind of veered into that territory for me. And again, it didn't make it worse. It just kind of, to me, I would imagine it makes it less accessible to people when a lot of the humor is based on being kind of disgusting. And it had me, do not get me wrong, I was cracking up. This movie had me in stitches. As far as being funny, I give it a 10 out of 10. Like, there were so many good jokes in this movie. But I do think that it would probably be a turnoff to people.
So, what's interesting, and I do think there's a difference from the version that you watched and the version that I watched, was specifically that sex scene that you're discussing. In the version I watched, she suggests it, or, it's implied, and then it immediately cuts to him just throwing up. That's it.
Okay, mine, and I thought this was a funny joke, because it was kind of a movie reference, which I normally don't like, but I like it when it's done well enough. Like, so she suggests sex, and then it cuts to her on the bed smoking while Hello Darkness, My Old Friend plays.
Yeah.
So, graduate reference, and it's him puking. And then as she's getting up to leave, it's like in the background you see him throwing up, and in the foreground, again, it's like a reference to The Graduate, but she's really ugly, and she's like putting her leggings on and stuff, and it's got like a real close-up of her crotch.
Yeah, see, and, I think that crotch shot was added in that version, because I remember her putting her stockings on, I remember her smoking, but there was nothing about her body except the fact that she's old that was shown to be super disgusting or anything like that. So
it's possible we saw the same scene and we just have different reactions to it, because the way the cut of the movie I saw, the whole scene plays out in a like a master shot, I guess you could tell it. Again, it's the version I saw was like a homage to The Graduate, the whole like Mrs. Robinson putting her leg up, like, close to the screen, and you see him stand. But in this sense, he's puking in the toilet while she's got her leg up, putting her stuff on. But and again, I don't think it's bad. I just thought it was like pretty. Again, like, it's not even in a Jim Carrey film, but going back to last year when we were talking about Yes Man, there's kind of a joke where Jim Carrey has sex with his landlady, and it's played for laughs that she's old, but it's not really drawing attention to
her
in the same way this film was. And that's where, again, I don't have a problem with it, but I could see someone possibly saying that it's problematic or something like that. And even if people don't feel that way, I could see it being just gross to people and maybe not as funny.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of that in this movie. And again, it doesn't make it bad. Quite frankly, a lot of the Farrelly Brothers films do use a lot of gross out comedy. Like, tons. Have you seen There's Something About Mary?
I have not.
My God, there is
So I guess that's a good thing.
I'll save it for potentially next year, but there's a lot of gross out humor in that movie. But again, it does have heart. Like, the main character is still likable and everything like that, and the story is engaging.
What's interesting to me is you describe how dark that opening scene is and what happens to him and how Bill Murray's character essentially does that to him. I mean, yeah. But you're like, I didn't care about the I'm like, what? How could you not want to see him redeem himself?
No, well, like, again, I think part of it was deflated because I knew it was coming. Again, I'd seen this movie in pieces on TV. Mm-hmm. I think the first time I saw it, I just was like, probably kind of like my sister, like, whoa, that's dark.
Yeah.
And obviously I wanted Bill Murray to get his comeuppance. And that's, like, so I think I even said this in our last review, but, like, I definitely did, because you said that the road trip stuff didn't go on long enough, and I said that it kept the film from feeling long. Mm-hmm. This film felt long enough that I kind of didn't care by the final act, because I was just like, just get on with it. He wins the bowling competition, which I was wrong about, by the way. But still, it was like, by the time he finally got there, I was just like over it. I was like, whatever, I'm sure he's going to have some kind of a happy ending, which did end up happening.
Yeah.
But like, so the two things. One, I would argue, I think this probably didn't do... I do think you're right. I think the tragedy probably played a part in this not doing well at the box office. But one thing I feel like with this film, and even another Farrelly Brothers film, Stuck on You, that came out later that I don't believe did very well, is I think this was kind of a weirdly niche film as far as like the subject matter. Because you've got a lot of Amish jokes, and then you've also got like a professional bowler. And I understand that like the joke is that bowling is not considered a very respected professional sport. So like, it would be kind of funny to do like a sports movie about bowling, sort of the way like a comedy I liked when I was like in middle school was Dodgeball, and it's kind of the same thing, like taking a sport that no one takes seriously and making it a serious sports movie. But I do
remind me to circle back to that, because I actually had a point in that, but keep going.
Oh, that's good to know. But yeah, so I think that like most people, if they were like seeing a trailer for this, they would probably not find it as appealing. Like, one thing Dumb and Dumber had was that it was a very relatable kind of story, even if you're not an idiot, and even if you're not like, you know, being tracked by gangsters trying to get a suitcase back to someone. It is such a simple story that anyone can relate to it.
Right.
Whereas this is about a professional bowler getting a Amish person to compete in a professional bowling competition in Reno, Nevada. And it also has the road trip element to it, which I felt like went on. Actually, I don't think the road trip was the problem. Honestly, the competition at the end felt endless, because it was just montage after montage of, you know, them competing and everything like that.
Yeah.
So there's that. And the other real criticism I have, and it's more just puzzling than it is a criticism, and I was talking about this with my sister, is it's like this, you have Bill Murray, and he's barely in the movie. He's in a lot of the opening, and he's in a lot of the end. But you have Bill Murray as the antagonist, right, and you hardly utilize him. And my theory behind that is this was kind of, a lot of people will find this surprising if they didn't grow up in the 90s, but Bill Murray's career almost died in the 90s.
Yeah.
He was really big in the 70s and 80s. He was on SNL. He was in Ghostbusters. We talked about Scrooged, where he was like the highest paid actor in that movie. But when the 90s came around, he started doing a lot of bad movies, and he was almost like a Renton actor. Like he was, there was some comedy he was in where he co-starred with an elephant. You know, and essentially his career was dead until he met Wes Anderson, and he sort of revitalized his career with like his weird indie comedy sort of movies, and then eventually his career picked up, and now he's back, you know, to where he is.
Yeah.
But that's something that is kind of a time capsule that I feel like a lot of our younger listeners won't know, is that Bill Murray was kind of a hack in the 90s. And that's my theory as to why he wasn't in this movie more. Because I do think he does a really good job. He's a really good antagonist. Like, you hate this guy, especially after the opening where Woody Harrelson loses his hand.
Yeah. But
I just found it very strange that, like, you would pay to have Bill Murray in your film, and he's barely in it.
Well, I mean, but if you think about it, though, in The Silence of the Lambs, Anthony Hopkins is only in 13 minutes of the movie.
That is a good point, but Anthony Hopkins also was not an A-list actor. In fact, Silence of the Lambs is what made him famous. So it's like, assuming that Bill Murray continued to have his fancy price tag from Scrooge, you would want him to really be worth the money. Again, I don't know if like he lowered the price of him getting paid in movies in the future, but assuming, just going off of our review of Scrooged, that he was like one of the highest paid actors in Hollywood at the time, you would think that you would want to utilize him as much as possible. The reason Silence of the Lambs, like Anthony Hopkins barely was in the movie despite having one of the best performances, is because he was a stage actor. He was like in theater before that movie. I think he'd done some stuff in film, but he was not at all famous. That movie is what made him famous. That's part of the reason he'll still get giddy if you ask him to do a Hannibal Lecter impression to this day.
So I'm assuming then at the time they wanted him because first off, he wasn't the first choice for the role. Actually, Jim Carrey was their first choice for McCracken.
Oh my God. That would have been interesting. I don't think it would have worked.
I don't
Jim
think
Carrey
it would
was
have
young.
because I also think one of the reasons I wouldn't work Jim Carrey is at least at that point, Jim Carrey, you don't think of him as playing these mean bad guys, at least at the time.
Yeah, now he's Dr. Robotnik.
Yeah, exactly.
Now everyone thinks of him being a bad guy. Well, and also, like, I think I mentioned this in our Yes Man review, but I thought he was the bad guy in Burt Wonderstone.
Yeah.
That movie's terrible, but I thought he was really good in that. But as you say.
But, so, he wasn't the first, but, so, I do think Bill Murray, they were looking for a character, and Bill Murray... And actually, the more I've looked into Bill Murray, this makes more sense. He's really good at kind of playing these sort of just jerk characters. And I kind of get the impression that's because it's what he's like in real life. Like I'm sorry, I kind of wonder how much of McCracken was him acting and how much of it wasn't. I just kind of get that impression. I could be completely wrong. This is all alleged for entertainment purposes only. But I just kind of get that impression. But I also think, like you said, because his career his price wasn't as high, and so it wasn't like they brought in this, A-list high paid actor for the smaller parts.
Right? And I agree with you, by the way. I think he's really good at playing assholes. In real life, from what I hear, it's kind of a mix. If he likes you, he'll be really nice. But like, I think of like Charlie's Angels, where he was super rude to Lucy Liu.
Yeah.
And it's like, he can be a complete dick if he wants to be. That's kind of Bill Murray. He's not necessarily a jerk, but he can be. And he's definitely good at playing jerks.
Yeah. So for me,
but that's the question, right? Like, I would be curious. Like, did you find out if he still was as expensive as he was for Scrooge? Because if he was, then I do find that interesting. But if he wasn't, if he did actually like lower the price of him being in the film,
right,
then that would make a lot of sense.
Well, so I don't have an answer for that, but I do think he had to kind of go with, for this role at least, for him to be hired at all, considering he wasn't even the first choice, he would have had to have gone with market value for him at the time, which from what you've said was not high. That's my speculation on that, is I do not think it was the same that he got for Scrooged. But also in Scrooge, you also have to look at, because I do not know how actors pay works. It might be a flat fee for everything. It might be based on the size of the part. I don't know.
So this is the way it works. So let's say you're not famous, like you're just an actor, but you land a lead role or like a good role.
Right.
They'll pay you the base minimum salary of whatever it is for the Actors Guild, because the Actors Guild is a union, so they're like, this is what you have to pay an actor if they have a lead role or something.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's say that film is a hit, massive hit. That star or that actor becomes a star overnight. The sequel, you have to pay them twice as much.
Mm-hmm. Well,
so that's where that's also where you get Hollywood executives really trying to up the ante with sequels, because they want twice the income. They want twice the revenue for that film, because they're having to pay all of the same actors twice as much.
Well, and I've also read that
at the same time, the actors now can say, I got paid this much for this film, so that is now my rate. So if they get paid twice as much for that other role, now that is how much they can pay. They can, say I need to get paid.
That's true. So I think I actually just read there was some actress talking about how she's so thankful to Tyler Perry because Tyler Perry, even though she hadn't, she was a good actor, she'd been in lots of stuff, but she hadn't, been offered, any of these big paydays. And so Tyler Perry offered her, he basically asked her, what do you think you're worth? She quoted a figure and he paid her that. And because of that, she was now able to request that seriously and not get laughed out of places for her standard rates.
Man, I like Tyler Perry. I hate his movies, but he seems like such a nice guy. And hilariously, when he acts in movies that aren't his movies, he is excellent. But anyway, and then another example of the whole actor pay rate thing is it might be different now because he's not in the movies, but Robert Downey Jr. Just a few years ago was the highest paid actor in Hollywood. Mm-hmm. Why is that? Because he'd been in like 20 Marvel movies. So take what I just said and think about
it by like 6.
You get paid twice as much for every sequel you're in, right?
Right. Oh my God.
So
I love that.
by the time he was the highest paid actor in Hollywood, he was getting paid $10 million.
Oh, conspiracy theory.
So even if he was just like in a Spider-Man movie for 5 minutes, $10 million. Boom. So
okay,
that's how it works.
Conspiracy theory. The real reason why these directors are attacking Marvel movies is because they now have to pay people what they're worth.
Potentially, but also But that's the question, right? That neither of us know the answer to is what happens when you don't do well? What happens when you're filmed? Like, do you have to have your salary, or do you still request the same amount that you were worth? For instance,
based on logic, I would say from what we just talked about is you can still seriously ask your offer, your rate, but realistically. Right. People won't hire you because of performance at box office. Does that make sense? So then I think that's
that makes perfect sense. And the other thing, this is something I was actually curious about is like within the last few years, like Robert Downey Jr. after leaving Marvel, he was in the Dr. Dolittle movie, which was horrible from everything I've heard. But it does also beg the question, like, was he paid the same amount he was paid to be Iron Man in that film? I would think so. And also another thing that does happen is actors can change their mind. Like if you're getting tons of money, you can decide to do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And there are times when actors just really like a role and they get the role and they're like, I know I'm more expensive than what you can give me, so I'm going to do this for like the baseline. I'm basically going to pay what is it? It's not spec. For some reason that's in my mind.
Scale.
But basically like what I was talking about, like the base pay that you get through the Actors Guild. Exactly. Like the lowest amount you can pay me. That's what I'll do it for.
I mean, that's
tons of
that's what what's her face is. All the Money in the World. It had Christopher Plummer, Mark Wahlberg, and I forget what the actress's name was, but when they had to go back and do reshoots, because originally Kevin Spacey played Christopher Plummer's role, when that all came out and they wanted to do reshoots to basically keep him out of the movie, the actress, and it's killing me that I do not remember her name, she said, well, she said, I will, she basically, she would have, the way she phrased it, I would have done it for free, but because I just pay me what you legally have to, which was whatever.
Exactly.
And then of course Mark Wahlberg was a scuzzball and negotiated for a higher rate, and then it was and then it was fabulous because then he got shamed into donating it all to charity. Which I'm sorry, that was so
he nearly freaking murdered a Vietnamese man. No, but No, but so like that happens a lot. That's an example. There are actors who they just really want to play a role, so they, they're like, yeah, just pay me the base rate for the Actors Guild, and
Michelle Williams. That's who it was. It was Michelle Williams. Sorry.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah, so like it's always negotiable. So I'm with you. I kind of feel like Bill Murray might have been cheaper in the 90s than he was in the 80s. But it's something that was just in my mind. I was like, as I was watching this, partly because we had just reviewed Scrooge a few months ago, and I was just thinking, he's expensive. How
Right.
he's like barely in this movie, and he's very good in it, but yeah.
Well, there's a couple things that were interesting about this movie. One, I'm a bowler by trade, so I really
Nice.
appreciated. I used to like bowl in leagues and stuff. I love bowling.
Really?
Yes.
I did not know that about you.
Next time you come over, I will have to show you. I have my own engraved
Oh,
I have my own engraved bowling ball. I love
oh,
bowling.
I'm going to have to like now now I want to see if I can beat someone who has competed, professionally,
Well,
so to speak.
it's been a
'Cause I
decade.
like
It's been a decade, so you probably could.
I like bowling.
I love
Speaking of
bowling.
which, that was a funny joke in the movie where the Randy Quaid's like, "Oh, it's so great being about or around all these athletes," and just shows all these overweight men smoking. It was just like,
Well, what I love
that was a good joke.
I want to circle back to something you had said previously. You talked about kind of comparing it to dodgeball, and I had sort of done that in my head. And dodgeball's still funny, but it's not one that I like as much. And you talked about how this movie has more of a male gaze, and to me,
Yes.
dodgeball is a very male gazy movie.
I'm not disagreeing.
No.
Whatsoever.
I have a point about that though. But I have a point about this, and I will agree. This does have more of a male gaze. However, I feel like it serves an alternate purpose in this movie than it does in dodgeball, because like even in dodgeball they put in this lesbian kiss at the end, and that was just all that was is for all the weird gross men in the audience for them to get excited about. Like, it was not necessary. Do you know what I mean? It was kind of like reverse shock value almost. It was like,
I do.
let's
I
make this
also
erotic.
I dodgeball. I still like it because I feel like it evens out. Like, because the whole like Ben Stiller's villain is basically like a comedic piss take on like toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
So like, and also like, again, I saw dodgeball when I was in like middle school, and I wasn't really pervy at that age, and I just thought the lesbian thing was kind of funny. Like, and she wasn't a lesbian; she was bisexual.
I forgot about that. She's like,
That was like the joke. Like, they all thought she was a lesbian because she could throw really hard, and then she's like, "Hey, I'm not a lesbian. I'm bisexual." It was still probably not exactly politically correct, but whatever. I thought it was funny at the time, and I still kind of think it's funny. She's a cool character, and I like. But anyway, yeah, no, I kind of agree. Although I will say in Kingpin, I don't think there was any reason for there to be a love interest in the movie. I think you could cut all of that out, and it would still be like, honestly, like, you could turn it into kind of a bro like friendship movie between him and the Amish guy.
I think so. I do like Vanessa Angel in this. I do like her character in this movie, and what I like about her, you talk, because especially let's talk about the way that she dresses. They put her in very tight, very short clothing, lots of cleavage, and I do think that serves a purpose, because in the way that she's presented at first, and then as we get to know her, she's the smart one. She knows business. She can get things done. She's making things happen. And like that whole sequence where they're winning tournaments, like, we do have her in this skimpy little off, but the whole point is that she's essentially using her sensuality to basically trip up essentially pervy men, because if you notice, what's his face, Ishmael, he's never thrown off by that, and I think that's interesting. And not to get all philosophical here, but Camille Paglia has said, because she's talked about how traditionally the line on like strippers and exotic dancers is that they are the victims, degrading themselves. And she's like, no. She's talked about they're the ones with power. They're essentially using men's natural desires against them to take their money that they work for. And
Absolutely, and there's like a whole other podcasts to be made about sex work, but like really the only victimization is usually when it's like a pimp running the like if they don't have like any agency in their career, then there's something to be said about that. But as far as like it's a valid business and
Right.
all
Well,
that sort of stuff. But I agree with you. I just don't think like it's kind of one of those things where there's a function for it in the movie and outside of the movie. In the
yeah.
movie, it's part of her character because she's smart. She knows that she can grift these people by showing her body.
Yeah.
Outside of the movie, it's to get people's butts in seats. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure you've seen the poster for this movie where it's
Yeah.
like Ishmael and like, and she's bending over,
I
like,
do
and her head's
not
upside down and
I
stuff.
I do not understand that poster because to me that
It's
poster
to get butts in
well,
seats. It's and again, like
yeah.
I nothing, no shame to Miss Angel who portrayed her or anything. She did a great job. But again, it's like there's no point in that character being there other than to be kind of eye candy. I don't think that her character is poorly written. I don't think it's poorly performed, but I do still think like going into this, like again, Dumb and Dumber was a tight 90 minutes, possibly 100 minutes. This movie was almost 2 hours long, and by the end of it, I was kind of like, "Oh my god, this keeps going." And I was just thinking by the end of like stuff that would be able to be cut out, and a good chunk of it was like all of the bowling montages at the end. But another thing I was thinking is like this character is just unneeded. No offense to the actress or anything, it's not her fault. But and that too, like the very end of the movie is kind of that cliche, like, oh, I love you, like because we spent like a week together, and now suddenly, like it just feels like really phoned in.
So
And it wasn't really for most of the movie the kind of movie where there would be a love interest. It was more about like this guy taking this equal and even that too. Like I actually think that there was kind of a cool parallel between the young version of Woody Harrelson and Ishmael, because they're both really young and naive. They're not aware of like grifting people or like all of the vices of the world. Woody Harrelson's character wasn't an Amish person, but he also was like just a kid when he lost his hand.
yeah.
So if you're getting really deep and overthinking this stupid comedy, like it feels like it wants to be like a buddy comedy, like of this guy, like, hey, I used to be you and I want to take you under my wing and stuff. And then when you halfway through the movie just throw in this female love interest for Woody Harrelson to like win as a prize in the end of the movie, it just feels really like it's trying to please the audience more than anything. And I don't think that has anything to do with the actress
Yeah.
or her performance. I just feel like it's a one of those 90 cliches that thankfully we're not seeing very much in films anymore. A lot of movies nowadays, like they are realizing, hey, we don't need a love interest.
Yeah.
It can just be about this character improving their life.
So
There doesn't need to be TNA in this film.
so so I agree with you partly. I do think her character is necessary. And I believe her character because I think for this story it needs to be a triangle. Ironically, like the poster. There needs to be because Ishmael doesn't really encourage any sort of change in Woody Harrelson's character at all because he just looks up to him. He really does. And her character is the one that really kind of pushes him to change, and be different, and to approach things differently, and to realize when he's screwing up. And I do think there needed to be a third person there. So I do think her character is necessary, and I do think for it being bowling, which is again, it's one of these. If you think about bowling, it's all like you said, it's all these overweight weird men. They needed somebody who could use that against them. So I do agree with her character there. However, what I agree with you on is the ending was so disappointing as far as making her a love interest. I was like, she does not need to be. What I would have liked to have seen, ideally, what I wanted to see happen, is for them to go into essentially business together. I would have loved that. But the 90s was a time when people still had that belief that men and women couldn't be together without them being a couple. It's like when Like, I watched that show, The Rookie, that's on ABC right now, and there are these two characters that are partners. And it's all they are is partners, but everybody online is like, oh my God, let's see them get together. We need them to be together. And we're like, no, we kind of just like this because they can just work together. So I disagree with you on the point where her characters, I do think her character was necessary, but I agree with you on the ending and how it was kind of like, a prize at the end, which I did not like either. I wished they would have left her as essentially them going into business together or something, or if they had decided to, if Ishmael had decided to leave, Amish people, they would have become his managers or something. That's what I wanted to see happen. And so that's kind of like where I stand on her. And that's why I hate this poster, because I feel like this poster, and I did not watch the trailer. I should have, but I didn't. I feel like the poster and everything is misleading. And I know you talked about it's to get people into the theater. And like I said, when we talk about Dumb and Dumber, it's because it was pandering to this specific demographic that they believed would see male comedies. And I feel like the film is different than what is portrayed potentially in the trailer, and definitely with what's on the poster. So that's kind of my argument with that. And now,
I completely agree.
And I need a sip of water.
No worries. I completely agree. And and you do raise an interesting point about the fact that Ishmael wasn't really bettering Woody's character. So I do agree with that. And also, like, as a counterpoint to like what you were talking about with this poster, Dumb and Dumber, like, again, like, they didn't need to do any of that to get butts in seats. Like, the poster for Dumb and Dumber, it's good at explaining what the movie is, but it's also, like, again, it's more wholesome than this movie because it's just the two of them, like, playing with each other's faces.
Yeah.
Again, like, it's simple. Again, like, hey, two stupid guys. That's what the movie's about. You want to watch two stupid guys go to Colorado? We got you. We got you right here. No, but that's really good. Shoot, while you were talking, I was thinking of like some other things.
You talked about the bowling montages, and so of course she has a bowl. I love the bowling montages, but going back to the one where she's trying to, they're trying to basically hustle them out of some cash by throwing the guys off and everything, with her being seductive. I was like 100% sure, and I was so upset it didn't happen. I thought it would have been hilarious if there had been like a gay bowling league they'd been playing against or something. And
maybe
she does.
So maybe this is the unrated version I accidentally watched or something. But there was that joke. It wasn't gay people though.
No, yeah, it was the farmers with the sheep.
I thought that was funny.
I did too.
I thought that was very funny, and also I think that's funnier than. I guess, like, if it was a gay league, that's not necessarily not funny, but I like that it wasn't, like, making a joke at the expense of gay people. It was making a joke at the expense of people who have sex with animals, which I'm always okay with.
Well, first off, a couple of things. One thing, I love that Ishmael is aware of that point, because he's the one that suggests it.
Yeah.
But, like, I just think it would have been interesting, because I feel like if they're all portrayed the same way, it would have been fine. Like, if they'd been, like, I would have thought it would have been hilarious if it was like a gay league, right? And then Claudia and Woody Harrelson swapped places.
That's what I was expecting to happen. And then the sheep. Sheep thing happened, and I was like, okay, that's still funny.
That's still funny. But I liked it because it was also unexpected.
Right? And I remembered one thing I was talking about. One thing I thought was, because I mentioned the fact that the Farrelly Brothers are from Pennsylvania.
Uh-huh.
And again, it's surprising to me they didn't write this. Well, it's surprising and it's not surprising. It's not surprising because I feel like it's one of their weaker scripts that they've directed. But it's not surprising because they're from Pennsylvania, which, as a lot of people in the U.S. know, is, there's Amish countries all over the place. You said you went to one in Indiana.
Yeah.
But a lot of Amish people live in Pennsylvania.
There's a whole X-Files episode about that.
Yeah, and I mean, this film, like, Woody Harrelson's character lives in Scranton, Pennsylvania, so it's, it's not that... It makes sense that it would be set here. But it's honestly, like... it's very American film in the sense that like it's funny like the things that are considered stereotypically American, quote unquote, because a lot of them are not really American, or at least they're more complicated. Like when you think of American sports, you think of like baseball and football.
Right.
One of the oldest American sports is bowling.
Yeah.
You know, it was one of the things that people who founded this country played. It's the same way as like people often forget popcorn or corn in general is like probably one of the most American foods because it was, you know, grown by natives and, you know, like it didn't used to exist anywhere else in the world. So, like, I thought that was kind of interesting. And again, like I mentioned this earlier, it makes the movie very niche. It's a very strange combination of elements in a film.
Yeah.
Again, like the sports thing, the bowling thing, the Amish thing. And I think you're right. I think that tragedy definitely hit the box office hard, but I do think this probably still wouldn't have performed as well as Dumb and Dumber just because it was such a very bizarre and specific story that it was telling.
I agree with you. I think it would have been like a modest success.
Yes, I agree. I think it would have at least broken even if it wasn't for the tragedy.
It did break even, but it didn't. But you know, it basically broke even and made just very little after that. I think it would have done not Dumb and Dumber, but it would have been like you said. It would have been considered a success, if not a block. It wouldn't have been a blockbuster, but it would have at least been a success. And this was just basically just like barely made back its budget. And yeah, now we're here. But so there was there's actually connection to Dumb and Dumber in this. Do you remember when they get into a fight at the dance hall because Ishmael is dancing with this guy's woman or whatever?
Yes.
Okay. So
was it Seabass?
Yeah. So Skidmark is related to Seabass. It has. I read this online. Apparently, this has been confirmed somewhere in one of these interviews with the Farrelly Brothers, but this has been confirmed. And Skidmark, the guy that fights him, is played by Roger. I think it's Roger Clemens. Roger Clemens from the Red Sox. But yeah.
Oh my God! And they also got another athlete.
Yeah. So
that's great.
He's supposed to be related to Seabass. But I thought it was funny. But also interesting to me is they actually had some professional bowlers appear in this movie. They had Parker Bone III and Mark Roth appear during the tournament, the final tournament, and Mark Roth actually loses to Woody Harrelson's character. And they shake hands, but they were pro bowling Hall of Famers that appeared in this movie. And then also I read that Bill Murray's final thing where he bowls 3 strikes, Bill Murray actually did bowl 3 strikes. In that at least one of the takes that they did of that scene, he did bowl 3 strikes in a row. And then Woody Harrelson was a terrible bowler, so he had to have lots of help from special effects, making sure that he bowled correctly.
Well, you know what's funny is even if he wasn't a terrible bowler, I feel like that was something watching the film I thought about is like he's doing it with a rubber hand.
Yeah,
that must be freaking hard. Like.
Right.
Both for the character and also like if you're trying to act with like a fake hand, it's like, wouldn't there be a better prosthetic to use to bowl than that drives me crazy. I'm not a pro bowler like you, T.
Okay, I'm not a pro bowler. I just said I bowled in leagues. Okay, I don't know where this pro came from. But I'm
not a pro bowler like you, T.
I did get a small
I like to have
scholarship
some finger
from the
control.
Youth Bowling League. That's cool.
But that's good. One thing I want to say before we ever end up ending this, I just need to say this, is that band at the end of the movie, like I wasn't a huge fan of like, oh, haha, the Amish people are listening to like a popular band of the 90s, but that band that was playing, I don't know if you caught on to this, that is the best harmonica playing I've ever
Wasn't that heard. Great?
It was unreal. It literally, like, I'd never heard of that group before, but both me and my sister was like, this almost sounds fake. It's so precise in the notes that they're hitting.
So it was an actual band called
It was in the credits. I remember it was like the
Blues Traveler.
Blues Traveler. That's what it was, and the song was called "So Anyway."
Yeah,
but
but
for anyone
anyway.
who's curious, but anyway, yeah. So if anyone's curious what I'm talking about, look up that song. That harmonica playing is ridiculous.
That was great. That was a nice little thing at the end. But you know what's interesting is I kind of like though the portrayal of Amish people in it. It didn't make them seem ridiculous. You know what I mean?
No.
And
No,
I feel like that would have
uh,
been super easy to do or something, and nobody like it didn't cross into like what I would consider disrespectful territory, where like Woody Harrelson rolls in and like sleeps with somebody or something like that. Do you know what I mean?
I do love that they cast, obviously, possibly a model or like a famous, actor. The person who played Rebecca, like the Amish girl that Ishmael was into.
Mm-hmm.
I love that they made her like ridiculously conventionally attractive. But yeah, like no, there were plenty of Amish jokes, but it was never at the expense of the Amish. That's always like that's my opinion for like what is offensive. Who is being made fun of?
Yeah.
Because you can make jokes about the Amish, but I don't think it's fair if you're making fun of them. You know what I mean?
Right. Like all the jokes were at the
great
expense.
Example.
They were at the expense of Woody Harrelson being a fish out of water, essentially.
Yeah, and also him being terrible at everything. And also being such a loser that he like stops raising a barn in between that like
to get food.
Yeah, he's like, again, like the Amish people see perfectly fine in the movie. Like, there's never like a joke like, oh, look at these weirdos or something. It's always, as you said, it's that, quite frankly, most of the movie is at the expense of Woody Harrelson's character. Everything that is funny, it has to do with him, which is kind of sad because he started off as such a nice guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, like this movie, it's a mixed bag for me.
That's your catchphrase.
Incredibly.
That should be your ending phrase. You always say mixed bag.
I don't always say mixed bag. Depends on which movie we're talking about.
I think the only other time I'd heard mixed bag before I started doing podcasts with you was on standardized tests.
I don't know when I've heard mixed bag in a standardized test, but as I said before, this movie to me was super, super funny.
Yeah.
But as far as like being engaged in the story, it was like, I was just waiting for the next joke. Ironically, I will give the Farrelly Brothers credit since they didn't write this one that that wasn't their fault. But it's not bad.
I have a suspicion just based on how the movie was structured that there might have been a rewrite of the ending at probably the request of the studio. You know.
They gotta make sure all those people are pleased with the happy romantic ending with the token hot girl.
Right, because like I just don't feel like I feel like for a lot of the movie until like the end there wasn't like sexual tension or romance.
There was zero sexual tension.
Yeah,
I cared more about Ishmael getting with Rebecca than I did with Claudia, and like I did not care. And that's, I think, part of the reason I felt like she should be cut out completely. But yeah, all in all, I think I would give this film, I'll give it 2.5 pins out of 10. Out of 4. Not out of 10.
Out of 4.
I was too stuck on the bowling.
Don't you mean 15 because they work twice as hard? I'm just kidding. I would give this. Oh my God. I would give this 3 out of 4 pitchers of sweet tea.
I'm excited.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad you enjoyed it because
I did.
After last episode, I was worried. I thought it was gonna be like, oh, he hated it.
No. I will say, like I said this last episode, but the one thing this and There's Something About Mary kind of suffers from is there is a bit of shock comedy, like not to the point where it's offensive. But this is a movie where if I were to watch it right now, I would not laugh as hard because I remember all the punchlines. We were talking last episode about how that is kind of
That's a problem for comedies.
Yeah, and it's like I mentioned there was a scene in There's Something About Mary that had me laughing so hard because I forgot that it was in the movie. And that's kind of a lot of the scenes I was talking about, like the urinal scene and the psycho scene. And the psycho scene is just funny. But like a lot of the more gross out kind of shock comedy stuff in this movie, you'll have to wait several years before rewatching because it helps if you don't remember what the punchline is
Right.
before seeing it again. And again, with Dumb and Dumber, I don't think it has that problem because a lot of the jokes are still very like rewatchable. Like even if you know where it's going, it's still funny to get there. Whereas this, like the urinal joke, for instance, I'm not going to laugh as hard because I didn't know where it was
also
going.
didn't think that joke was as a gross out as you classified it because we don't see anything happening.
No, you're right. Like shock is what I would consider that. Like the shock of, oh my god, he's taking a poop in the urinal. Like that's what it is. But yeah, so like that's really the worst thing holding it back, comedy wise. Story wise, I blame the two writers who wrote this one instead of the Farrelly Brothers, but I just didn't really care too much about like what was actually going on in the story.
And see,
But,
I just call you heartless because that was a harrowing story. Losing your hand by essentially the underworld, shoving your hand into a ball retrieval machine, and then you have to live life, and you get the chance to face off against your the guy that brought that to you. Oh my god, whiskey is heartless. Start a hashtag.
Hashtag heartless whiskey. No, but it is enjoyable if you like comedies, if you like the Farrelly Brothers, and you kind of like a little bit more edgy like 90s comedies, and for some reason you haven't seen this, I do think it's worth watching. Just keep in mind it's probably not going to be your favorite Farrelly Brothers movie, but you know, if for some reason you haven't seen it or have an interest in seeing it after listening to us spoil some of the jokes, it is funny. I can definitely say that.
I mean, there is a connection to for those of you that like Groundhog's Day. The guy that's the other reporter in Groundhog's Day, or the cameraman in Groundhog's Day, he is in this movie as the betting guy. I don't even think his character even has a name.
I didn't even notice that.
I did.
Sweet. Well,
it was weird to see him with hair. Anyway, so thank y'all.
Let's try and sign off with something else. I will say this time. Keep tuning in with us for a real good time.
And now, since I'm being forced to change my signature catchphrase, I will say
be sure to vote on Suck It Scorsese.
Yes.
Hopefully we'll be doing Twitter polls.
All right, whiskey will be on Tinder for those of you who want to find him.
Twitter polls for these. It's this Dragon's Milk, guys.
Oh my god!
Told you this would be a spicy episode. But Twitter polls for like all these different like sign-offs. I don't even remember what all of the ones I've said for this year are, but hopefully we can find one that sticks. And I like Suck It Scorsese. That's a fun one.
That's a fun one. Here, how about for this? I'll say for this one, get in, bitch. We're going bowling.
Nice.
On topic. Surprisingly.
Sweet T's a professional bowler. Confirmed.
I never said professional. I don't know where you got that from.
Professional. I mean, if you're in a league, knowing that, now we have to look at the Big Lebowski in the future. I have a feeling you'd enjoy that one.
I'm apprehensive about that one, but
I think you'd like it.
With that being said, what is your ending phrase?
Scream at us on Twitter or Tinder or Instagram.
Okay. And
please give us a follow. Let us know what you'd like us to review. We will always take into account if there's any requests. Feel free to check out our backlog of episodes. And if you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to like and subscribe if you're so inclined.
And if you want to check us out, you can listen to us on any of the other streaming platforms that we are available on as a podcast. Don't watch us on those. Stream us on those, is what I meant to say. And also let us know on Twitter if whiskey should be drunk for more episodes.
But what if they like to watch T? What if they like to watch the podcast?
You know what? I am not going to stand in the way of their happiness. If you want to go watch a podcast, watch a podcast.
You can draw a picture of what you think we look like, tape it to your wall and just stare at that while you listen.
That's not creepy, but okay.
Spoiler alert, we're bringing back anime, guys.
Yes,
so,
we will be bringing back
any anime fans will be happy.
So yeah, stay tuned for that, and we will catch y'all in the next one.
Peace.
Reels on the Rocks is a production of La Prince Laboratories. It is edited and produced by Alejandro Castillo and features original artwork by Asa Esparza and original music by Pat Mars. Follow us on Twitter at Reels on the Rocks and tweet at us with any movies or topics you'd like us to discuss in the future.